afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we will discuss an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of care. With your host, pound of cure. With your host, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have close to 16 members on Zoom and 15 members on Facebook. I have Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Oh, thank you so much, JM. Great to see you and to be with everybody here today. Don't you love it when someone comes up with a cure for something? But actually, it's very rare because it's hard to cure things in this world. Once they take hold in our lives, in the world, then the cure sometimes is worse than the disease itself. That's a statement from one of the ancient wisdom literatures. So better not to need something and to take heed of this saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, to stay in a preventative state as best as possible. One of the ideas from the title today is that our greatest asset is our life. And really, it's our duty to protect it as much as possible, body, mind, and words. In fact, the ancient wisdom literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, says that that's our primary duty, is to make sure that we stay alive somehow or other, because we need to use this body for coming to the ultimate goal of life. So we're going to talk about that today, ways of adding preventative measures to one's life so that we can not fall from our exalted position or come under the influence of various influences of the world. And after we do our due diligence, if something happens, then what can be done? We do the best we can with what we have. And after that, it's up to providence and fate of how we're affected by the world. JM, do you have any other points that you want to make before we get started?
No, we are good.
Okay. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining today. Really great to have you here. So in the process of fortifying ourselves, we have to take some time for ourselves. There's a self-investment that's needed. This is the process of self-realization, to come to see who we are, where we are, what the purpose of life is. Otherwise, we'll be buffeted from one place to the next by circumstances, by the demands of the senses. And then when we have an opportunity for becoming stabilized, in the sense that we have an idea of who we are and what our purpose of life is, then we can take various preventative measures to protect our mission in life. Whatever our goal is, then we go off on a mission to reach that goal. And it makes a lot of sense to protect the greatest asset that we have, this short lifetime, which can end in an untimely way if we're not careful. Not only that, we can waste a lot of time. So let's start off with some introspection, because one of the ways in which we can come to this feeling of stabilization is by looking inside and getting a sense of who we really are. So if you'll take a moment to sit up a little straighter than you were a second ago, and I can't verify anything because I can barely see any of you, and then close your eyes and relax, but keep an alert mind, and bring your attention to your breathing, and appreciate that you have breath and it's sustaining your life. It's a miracle that all the organs of the body, all the various functions, billions of them in combination, work in such a way that we can reside in this body, ambulate, think of things, write them down, move from place to place, express ourselves. And we're right in the middle of that miracle. One of the most vital, nourishing agents for it to go on is our breath. So just keep your attention on your breath and notice how when you breathe at an even pace, you feel calm and peaceful. And whenever the mind becomes overburdened with cognitive load, you can come to this simple place of focusing on your breath and then transfer your attention to a mantra. Man means mind and tra means to deliver. So mentally, as you're breathing, bring into your mind the mantra Rama. It's 2 syllables, R-A-M-A, Rama. And take 5 breaths, inhales and exhales. And on the exhale, mentally say Rama. And then notice if there was any resistance to keeping one mantra in your mind wanted to go elsewhere. In the process of meditation, you'll bring your attention back to the mantra. And now let's try saying out loud behind muted mics, Nitai Gauranga. I'll say it and you can say it along with me if you wish. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. And now just feel how there's a resonance from the sound vibration in your solar plexus, and that goes through all the cells in your body. A way to spiritualize your environment is to repeat the mantra inwardly, outwardly. And just consider for one moment how what you have now, the human body, is a gift from nature, a portal through which you can see out from the stringent laws of nature and work towards freeing your consciousness completely from this mechanical world. We live in a mechanistic world. Your consciousness is non-mechanistic. but somehow we've been caught in the machine as if we're imprisoned. We accept the conditions. And bring your attention back to your breath. You can rub your hands together, create some external friction, and then open your eyes and come back into the room. Welcome back. So I'm working right now in one sphere on idioms. In the Sanskrit world of the Vedic spiritual culture, there are also idioms that are passed down over many generations. They're called aitya, or wisdom that's passed from word of mouth. They get put into small sentences, short sentences, and they're packed with some kind of wisdom. And today's is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Does anybody know, without looking on Google or asking Siri or anybody else, where that comes from? Who said that? I think it's interesting context to know who said it.
Benjamin Franklin?
Yes. And what other thing did he invent that was for which that idiom would be an appropriate phrase? That's a harder question. First one was 250. That one's for 500.
Almanac?
So, huh?
The almanac?
That's a good one, because an almanac helps you get prepared, right? Yes, he did. I know. It's actually a volunteer fire department. He organized, according to historians, the first volunteer fire department. I thought it was quite appropriate, but I like almanac also because there's a way in which you look in to see what's going to happen in the seasons, and they're both appropriate. And so, why do you have a fire department on the ready? Why not just organize it at the last minute when there's a fire, or just let it go altogether? No, because the world that we live in is unstable and anything can happen at any minute, but we have a mission to accomplish in the world, and therefore we don't want to be waylaid. And therefore, if we take some time of preparing ourselves for preventing risks from manifesting into disaster or distractions in our life, then we can greatly benefit. We get a lot more time, energy, and we don't get waylaid. So let's look at a few points about prevention. It's a big topic in the world, especially in the context of health. And so first, we're going to look at it in terms of the research that's been done in preventative measures to help people stay healthy in the world. And then we'll translate it more into practical matters and also spiritual practice. So let's take a look at a couple of slides. Everyone okay so far? Vanessa said electricity. That's true too. And Naresh said Macbeth. I don't think Macbeth said it, but I'm going to look closely and see if he said something like that. So in prevention, starting from a model when we're talking about ways in which we prevent disease in the world, there are 3 levels. Actually, there's a 4th, but I'll talk about that later, because it's new and it's also kind of interesting. So I want to isolate it. First is primordial. There's a way of primordial prevention. That means there's a kind of foundational way in which we can institute prevention in our lives. And then there's primary and secondary. Let's look at their definitions. So the first one, primordial, means that it's you're amending social and environmental causes of disease. And again, I'm using this as a base from which we can extrapolate and talk about various ways in our lives that we can also use these models for preventing distraction or disaster. Amend social and environmental causes of disease. So here's an example. If you've ever heard the program Freakonomics, there's a statistician, scientist who looks at various trends in the world and traces them back to various phenomena that we might not have expected. Everything has some causality in this world. You may have seen a video about how in Yellowstone Park, wolves were reintroduced after they had been hunted to practical extinction. They were put back in the environment. And then not too long after that, the rivers became abundant again. They had dwindled. And ecologists traced the whole chain back to the wolves. One thing led to the next, opening up the environment and various other aspects in a sequence began to flourish because of one cause. So, example, better, safer sidewalks leads to more physical activity in a neighborhood, according to research, which decreases risk factors for obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, etc. We may not even notice it, that when there's an adjustment to the environment, like a better place to walk, where people can move around, they can be around open space, in open spaces and so forth. Actually, it has a systemic effect on the people in that neighborhood. They may not even know it, but studies show that these types of environmental changes make a difference. World Health Organization, the WHO, approximately 1/4 of the global disease burden and more than 1/3 of the burden among children is due to modifiable environmental factors. That's what we're looking for today, modifiable environmental factors in our own lives. Of course, we may want to extend it outwardly to our communities as well, and the world, obviously. But talking in the sense of what we can do now, we can modify our environment for being in a better position to prevent anomalies in our lives. I love this chart because it gives an idea of what we're talking about in environment. Environment is a generic sounding word, but when we look at the chart here and you look at the inward circle, the physical environment, and then we have a natural and physical environment, social, natural, and physical environment, behavioral, social, natural, and physical environment, and the total environment. There are overlapping influences in our lives all together in the aggregate, redundant, all together. They're known as our environment, but there are many layers that it's helpful when we're aware of them. Sorry, I'm not really speaking English today, but I'll work on it in the next few slides. So it's important to know, and this is one aspect of spiritual development, is that our environment, your environment is modifiable. It is something that we as conscious beings have something to do with. And it makes a huge difference, as the WHO talks about in detail in all their research around the world, of what kind of environmental ways there are that cause people disease. So similarly, there are mental and physical and spiritual ways that our environment affects us. So this is one way that we can be in a preventative mode, is to work systematically at upgrading our environment. So that's a project. And for those who follow the process of bhakti yoga, I was raised on it practically, at least from my teens, and learned in those formative years about the importance of environment. It takes work, actually. For instance, just to keep your environment clean takes a lot of work, because if you let it go for a little while, suddenly you're in an unfavorable environment, and it can cause you great mental stress, anxiety, what to speak of disease, if you don't attend to it. So the work that it takes to stay in what's called sattva, a sattvic environment that is clean, orderly, is one of the upgrades. There are others as well. So primary. We talked about primordial, which has to do with our environment. And the next is primary, which really talks about the individual and how an individual is in a preventative stature to limit risk exposure and to build the immune system. So this can be extrapolated also when it comes to the ways in which we deal with people, the world, and how it relates to our spiritual advancement. So let's talk a little bit about limiting risk exposure and building the immune system after we go through the other summaries. Secondary prevention, early disease detection in healthy appearing individuals through screenings. So there's a way in which secondary prevention talks about looking for things that statistically are there for many people and making sure that you catch them early before they fully manifest. And this is also helpful in all the aspects of our life. Be on the lookout. Don't assume it's going to be summer all the time. It'll turn to winter at some point. And if you know it's coming and you get ready for it, that'll be part of the ways of which you prevent having some full-blown difficulty in your life. Colonoscopy, by the way, is a highly recommended process. I'm just talking through, about medical science. There's a way in which people don't realize that they have colon cancer till it's too late oftentimes. But if you get early detection, then it can be warded off. Tertiary prevention, the third step, a reduction of the effects of disease when they're present. That means when you already have it, then there's ways in which you can rehabilitate yourself in favorable ways so that you get better faster. So those are the three clinical definitions of prevention when it comes to disease. And now, as I kept advertising, we're going to extrapolate from these a little bit and talk about how it relates to spiritual fitness and success sadhana. So primordial, when we talk about our physical and social environment, here are a few on the list, but I want to talk about them in the chat and also in the Zoom room. These are a few suggestions, but if you reorganize your environment, consider on a world level, as the World Health Organization says, and many studies, individual studies say sociological and also physical studies that track levels of disease, the environment makes a huge difference. And not just if it's a polluted environment, there are obvious links to certain types of respiratory disease, and the most common disease has to do with the lower tract. Different kinds of disease cause diarrhea that people die from because of becoming dehydrated and so forth. So there are also ways in which we can adjust our own environment. How much does it apply to us? How much are we being affected by the particular environment we're in, both physical and also social environment that we're in. So some of the ways in which to upgrade them that we've talked about before. In the way of reduction, there's getting rid of clutter. Clutter means things you don't really need. They're called unnecessary necessities. Don't really need it, but it's hanging around. But be methodical about that. Also, find out ways to reduce noise. Noise comes from a word that means seasickness. And the noise actually makes us sick. Noise means unwanted sound. It's extra and disturbing. And then find out ways to eliminate or reduce distraction so that we can feel as whole humans and notice that we have everything that we need to be happy if we're doing inner work, if we're practicing our spiritual tenets every day. And then things to add, a modicum of organization. The best mantra is a place for everything and everything in its place. And every home is well equipped with a sacred space. That means have some place in your home where you practice your meditation, your spiritual readings, where you gather with people to do what we're doing now, to discuss spiritual topics and so forth. If you have that, it becomes a nucleus in your home for yourself, for other people who live in the house, for spiritual practice. It's very helpful. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be simple, but if you designate it, it'll have an effect. Spiritual books, there's a science in the ancient wisdom literature called Vastu. It has to do with the effect of every object we have in our lives. Books are beloved in human society. They always have been. And when you have spiritual books, books of wisdom, books that are meant for your ultimate good in your space, they have a very powerful effect, even when you're not reading them. Of course, that's the ultimate goal. You want to absorb what's in them. But having them in your space has a very positive effect. It's like a spiritual radiation coming through your home. Then, one you've heard me talk about many, many times, if you've been on this program for a while, and that spiritual sound. Our lives have a soundtrack. In my home, I've made, and any of the organizations that I'm involved with, I always go first for the sound. Some of the places that I help with, that we reorganize the infrastructure so there are speakers throughout the entire building, wherever it may be. And I've done that in my home also, so that we can, at any given time, have spiritual sound coming through our home. And I always, when I travel, I always make sure that I'm bringing some device, some way of keeping the spiritual sound vibration going wherever I may be, because ultimately every realm is defined by the sound vibration that's in it. So you can change your environment in that way and bring in light and make sure that you're getting enough light. You're not just, you're able to see sunrises. You're able to take in some of the light that's coming from the sun, because that in and of itself is healthy in the environment. Okay, before we go to the next one, and now that we have some of these in mind, and what I'm getting at here today in extrapolating from the idiom from Benjamin Franklin, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Let's hear any reflections you have. You can light up the chat box like you're all so good at, or if you heard anything that's stuck in your mind, or that you think we should drill down into a little bit more, then you can just bring it up. What did you hear so far?
Hi, this is Yan Yan.
Hey, Yan Yan.
Hey. I have a story about my dog. that I'd like to share. This is about the prevention, but I learned it the hard way. When I first adopted him, he was my first dog, and we were bent over spoiling him with the treats. However, even though we were told that he needs to lose at least 4 pounds, he's a 60-pound dog. So when we got him, he was 64 pounds. But because he's adorable, he loves to eat, after about a year with us, he ended up 70 pounds. And that's when he showed the sign of limping. He was about 10 years old. I mean, it is that age that you will start to have a problem. And so we went to the vet. So the vet sat me down, said, I can medicate him. But most important is, if it's important, you want him to live a long life, you need to manage his weight. He needs to get down around 60 pounds. And without that, you just prepare yourself. There's really not that much I can do. So then we are like, okay, we'll do everything we can. We just switched his diet, very disciplined about the treats and exercise. And guess what? When his weight is back to 60 pounds or 59 pounds, his limping actually went away. He didn't have to keep taking pain medications. And so we were very, very happy. And he lived another, 5 years. We just said goodbye with him last Friday. And that's why I couldn't join the call. But he lived a happy life.
What was his name?
What?
What was his name?
Oh, he's got a funny name. His name is Tweak.
Our condolences to Tweak. And thank you for the story. It's instructive, because food is mentioned as being, of course, we can take it as medicine and fuel, and also the Bhagavad Gita recommends don't eat too much and don't eat too little. Eat what you need to maintain the body so that you can be healthy for spiritual practice.
Yes, we just have to change the structure and how we feed him. We did not deprive him. So
Yeah, little increments in that area can be very helpful, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Yan Yan.
Sure.
We have a comment from Facebook. Roman says, I have spent more than 10 years in cancer research. I came to the idea that prevention is more important element of curing the cancer. So much money is invested in finding drugs, but not much in cancer prevention, like improving quality of food, air, water, but most importantly, spiritual health and healing.
This is becoming a bigger area of research nowadays. A lot of mainstream, so-called mainstream going into this, doctors, researchers, and so forth, that if we take time to amend our ways, our diet, our environment, and so forth, then in the DNA that is ready to go off in a certain direction, we can waylay that, or it doesn't necessarily have to manifest if we are careful about the way we live, a little bit preventative, rather than just thinking, well, I'll take care of it when and if it manifests. But better to know ahead of time what might be coming, and then be a little preventative about it. Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thank you, Roman. What else, JM?
That's all we have so far.
Okay, Mayank in the chat box said, really like this phrase, our life has a soundtrack. And that is one of the ways in which we can easily upgrade our environment is by checking out what the soundtrack is now. Think about it. What's coming in and what are people actually saying and what is their motive for saying it, or what kind of sound vibration am I letting into the environment? And then think about trying to upgrade it. What kind of sound do I have from morning till night coming in? That's the soundtrack in my life, and that's going to determine my consciousness. And then we have Subhadra, who said, we're in the middle of this miracle. So what did you like about that, Subhadra?
I liked that it made me more conscious of the fact that I don't have to live in the future or worry so much about the past, lament, but something exciting is happening right now. Life, like you described it.
Thank you. This is something that caught my attention one day when I was reading about how every particle in the universe is unique. Every person is unique. Every circumstance is unique. And oftentimes the brain categorizes everything as just being ordinary, normal, seen it, done it, it's just a sunset, or just another person. But if I look carefully at the matter, as you're doing now, as miraculous, how is it manifested in this particular unique way? Then it is fascinating, and I can be in the moment. Yes. And Subhadra sent some love to you, Yan Yan. So sorry for losing your dog. Okay, you saw that already. All right. So let's hear any other thoughts that you have from the Zoom room about prevention. Any of the ideas that sound like you can use them. Harry. Okay. We'll come back. Let's go to the.
I don't know, Carrie, were you talking on mute or did you accidentally unmute yourself? We'll come back, I guess.
Okay. Back to the slides. So when we talk about primary prevention, limit risk for individuals in a population, example, build your immune system. So this is an example that my spiritual teacher used to give. Sometimes people would complain and they say, the forces of the world are so strong and difficult to overcome. For instance, the force of the senses. Oftentimes people with bad habits, like it's too hard to give up. They're oppressive. And he used to say that it's not that they're so strong, it's that you're so weak or your will is weak. So there is a way in which we can develop our willpower, and our what we call yoga balena, or spiritual strength that you get through practicing yoga. You don't have to make an overnight change, but if we make incremental improvements through looking towards spiritual advancement on a daily basis, then we'll start to notice that I'm a little stronger than I was. I have the willpower. In fact, we can come back in the Zoom for a second because I can tell I'm on a roll. That in one of the literatures called the Bhagavad Gita, there's a discussion about what's called Hridaya Daurbalya, which means weakness of heart. So this is a kind of weakness that can be overcome. But where does it leave me if my heart is weak? That is, my will is weak. I know I have bad habits, as an example, but I just can't do anything about it. is that true, that I'm just helpless? No, there's a way in which to boost our immunity towards bad habits, picking them up in the first place. And if we have them in an acute sense, there is a way to incrementally develop spiritual strength so that we can overcome them. So this is the spiritual process.
Like,
Yes.
a question, please.
Yes.
And I've heard, like, for people that live alone, like the immune system is usually like weaker, or it could enter into malfunction like easier, right? So you cannot. Many people cannot prevent living alone, right? So, what is there a way um, to decrease this, or like in the spiritual practice that you mentioned, what they should do so they prevent this happening to them? Is there a way, or is just the way it is?
Well, yeah, you make a really good point, as usual, Blanca, but it's one of the aspects of fortification that's really important, is to have community and also to have connections with people that you care about. It's mentioned in one of the most important spiritual teachings called the Nectar of Instruction, or the Upadeshamrita. Rupa Goswami, the teacher from 500 years ago of Bhakti, says that to be really solidly situated on the spiritual path, you should have loving relationships with others who are on the spiritual path. And then he names the 6 loving exchanges: giving gifts, accepting gifts, revealing your mind, hearing others reveal their minds, breaking bread. You give some food, or we call prasad, spiritual food, and accepting food in return. And so these are the primary ways in which people interact in the world anyway. But if you very purposefully have these, well, for those who are reclused, it can be very difficult. It can be an acute situation, that's for sure. That's why there are compassionate people who reach out to those who are in those situations to try to extend themselves. It's rare that people thrive when they're isolated. They need others. And so, in the bhakti process, bhakti yoga is really a community kind of yoga. It's people working together in groups and working towards developing community, because that's where you get a lot of your strength, and a way in which that you are strengthening your spiritual immune system. Because if you have good association, then you can take refuge there. Didn't exactly answer your question, other than to say, yes, it's very important to have connection. And it's also through community, it's really important. Like kids growing up, if they have a really strong community that's got these high-minded values, then they can remain strong even around temptation, where there's all kinds of unsavory habits waiting for them, even in high schools or before high school. and so, yeah, association is vital. It's really important.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so it's really just reaching out or trying to get closer to people that we know need that connection, or even if they probably don't reach out as much, I guess, as they should.
Yeah, I mean, that's a compassionate thing to do. And I mean, really, over the pandemic, we've been doing all kinds of shows like this all over the world, connecting people, and we've had really good results. A lot of people, I mean, just as an example, just this simple way of connecting every week or a few times a week, where people come together, they hear something, they see others who are, I find people like to hear that other people are suffering also. like, hey, it's not just you. We're all going through this, right? And then, you know, it gives you some solace. And so one of the ways that we've all gotten through the pandemic is having a place where we can come together and talk about, okay, we're just passing through this world. We're not our bodies. We're in this together and so forth, right?
Okay. So have you ever like known anyone that's like, I don't know, like succeeding being alone or that kind of thing? Like, I don't know, hermits or something.
Not so much.
Okay.
We've read about yogis who are recluse. There's a story from the ancient literatures about Kardama Muni. He was alone for a long time doing his meditations. There's also, but later on he wanted to get married, and then there was another great sage. He was named Bharat. He was a big king. This is thousands of years ago from the histories, and Bharat went off to practice meditation in the forest, and he was alone. So a lot of teachers in the succession since his time have talked about how he would have done better if he had had a little association. Because what happened to Bharat was he was doing this really intense meditation. He's living in the wilderness. And then he saw a deer one day miscarry and give birth to a fawn. The mother died, the fawn survived. And then he got attached to the fawn and forgot all about his meditation. And so, being alone is sometimes helpful, but too much of that, especially in the modern age, is really difficult for us to handle, and it's a difficult situation in which to thrive.
Okay, thank you.
At least from the perspective of the Bhakti Yoga process. Thank you, Blanca. Anyone else like to light up the room by speaking your mind?
Denise is here, I guess.
Oh, good.
Do you have anything to say, Denise?
We
It's
can't
not
hear you.
very clear. Yeah.
There's something wrong with the mic. It's distorted.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah. Now you're on mute, though. Denise, there you are. Okay, keep trying, and then when you can speak up at any time, and I'll come back to you whenever you can. Let's go. I have a few more slides.
Yeah. There's one, sure.
Yes, please tell me.
There was one point Vlad made on Facebook. He says, it shouldn't be called prevention, really. It's the default mode of living for those who are cognizant of the fact that everything, no exceptions, is constantly falling apart. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. It is an awareness that everything's falling apart. Well, there's also an awareness that I'm trying to inculcate now, in that there are attitudes, and in fact, let's go to the slides because I can talk about it from there. There are ways to position ourselves so that we're not as vulnerable to the ways of the world. As Vlad so aptly pointed out, things are falling apart constantly, and there are perils for us. It's not that we'll just cruise through on the default mode. We have to be careful. This is a point. That not only do we have to be involved in our practice, but we should be careful as we do it. So in the primary, we talk about body and mind, diet, exercise, sleep, recreation, and attitude. Those are good points to look at and see, how am I doing in those areas? And we can discuss more at another time, but in and of themselves, they're good categories. They all make a bit difference in body and mind. That's where the difference is made. And in spirit, there are ways to be involved in selfless service, spiritual community, reading. It makes a huge difference. If you have wisdom literatures and you read from them every day, your life will be different. I promise you. It totally changes the way you look at the world. And meditation, invaluable. it's important to take that time every day, no matter how short a time you have. And the next slide, tertiary. Reduction of the effects of a disease when they're already present, example, rehabilitation. So obviously good to have those who are specialized in taking care of the body and mind, whatever type of expert you are inclined towards, good to have them there. Also good to be regularly checking on your body, because as Vlad said, it's always changing and falling apart. Don't take it for granted that it's always going to be in one piece. So you have to look for those things, anticipate them, and don't just take it for granted. And then from the spiritual side, have a teacher or teachers that are spiritual physicians who are situated in the practice really well and can give you spiritual medicine in the form of guidance. And then advanced association. We talked about that with having spiritual community. Introspection. Take time to examine yourself. Don't just look at your life situation, but look at your life. And attitude. There's a few things I want to say about attitude. We come back in the Zoom room, but there's a way, risky attitudes that I already know everything. I'm liberated. I can do whatever I want. No, you can't, because there's stringent laws of nature and they will affect you. So taking a minute to take the advice of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who said, be humble in the face of all these mighty forces of nature, the mighty forces of the mind. Be a little bit humble. And also he said, be ready to give respect to others. He said, if you practice this, you'll be in a preventative mode. Be ready to give respect for others, and don't be in a mode of wanting to take respect for who you are, what you do. And if you stay in that, he called it amanina manadina, look to see how to give due respect to others, but don't expect anything in return. That's a very powerful practice. And if you remain in that mode, it helps to remain above the normal temptations of the world. And those mean that I take liberties because I think, well, I can do whatever I want to do. And also justifying what I'm doing right now. Of course, the principles I just mentioned are directly related to that. These are other points, but justification is another way in which I stay absorbed in the bad habits that I've taken on. It's like, I need this because. So there are a series of ways in which to amend that. One of them is to consider that I should own the problem. Don't go away and just ignore it. And then incrementally improve by taking up the proper course of action, spiritual practice, and also adjusting the various aspects of my life. And if you don't know what to start with the smallest thing that you can think of, because once you start, then you've got momentum going in the right direction. Let's see, JM, if there are more reflections or any questions.
Yeah, so Subhadra on the Zoom chat was wondering, could boosting immunity for being weak-willed have something to do with finding some hope?
Definitely. Nothing succeeds like success, if I may throw another idiom into the mix here. But yes, finding hope. And, hope springs eternal, but it's real when it's aligned towards our ultimate goal of life, which is to not take another birth in the material world and to improve ourselves spiritually. It can be done. And there's lots of help that comes with it when we decide, yes, I want to do this. Even the decision internally, if I can grab a hold of that and say, yeah, I'd rather be in a better position of life than being oppressed all the time by my senses and mind. And I'd like to make improvement. if I can just get in touch with that sincerity and say, yes, this is what I want to do. And if you can articulate it, write it down, say it, then there's a way that miraculously forces from within and from without start to come in to our lives to help us.
Sundar likes the point to improve incrementally.
Yes, that is in and of itself is a helpful point when it comes to prevention and also not falling down, because oftentimes one of the reasons for our folly is think all or nothing. That unless I'm perfect, then I won't do anything. I was just talking to somebody the other day who I'm very close with, and I hadn't talked to him for a long time, but he was bemoaning the fact that, oh, I've never been very good at this or very good at that. And I was thinking that in relationship with others, we can always say, oh, I'm no good at something. But if we do the best we can with what we have, we're going to be all right, because there's always going to be somebody better. And if we constantly compare ourselves, say, then unless I'm as good as that person in a particular skill or something, it's not attainable. And even when you get there on the material platform, then you're going to fall back at some time too. Like top athletes, they get to the top of their game, and then some young whippersnapper comes along and says, no, I'm better. So it's better to look at it incrementally and say, what can I do to increase my capacity to be a little bit better and have integrity? What else, Jam? The chat boards lighten up all of a sudden in the last minute.
Yeah. I think PPL says, it's a nickname, I guess, having spiritual mentors community has increased my happiness levels. Thanks to your team.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's important to have community and have mentors. That's how all highly successful people in any discipline make a rapid advancement. You name any kind of skill or discipline, and I'll show you there's a community and there's mentors. So find out what you want to do, and then find the people who are best at it. And where there's a community of people, they don't even have to be best, they can just be good. And then try to make a connection, and you're good.
BM Bar says, if you don't know what to start with the smallest thing you can think of. That way you will start to make progress in the right direction. I like this a lot. Very wise.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, also likes PPL's thought.
SNL likes PPL's thought. Thank you. Thank you so much. Aditi, okay. Thank you very much, Aditi. Okay, great. So we've come to the end of our time, but it's not too late to leave with a mantra. So one of the practices in Bhakti Yoga is to take time each day to chant a mantra. You can either do it by yourself or you can do it with other people. And since we're together, we can try it a little bit. So if you'll put up the Maha Mantra, this is a mantra that has 3 words, Hare Krishna Rama. They're all spiritual, and in combination, it's a spiritual formula that has been passed down through generations. And it goes like this when we're singing it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You can sing. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now you can leave with a song in your heart. And a few thoughts about taking time to fortify your body, mind, spirit, so that you're not attacked by the forces that tend to drag us down, and stay in a ready state and be careful, because you have the greatest gift of all, and that is this body, an opportunity to make spiritual advancement. Thanks everybody for joining today. Thanks JM for always being there and keeping the vibration going. Now, many of you might know or remember that high in the Himalayas, the yogis who live in caves come out every once in a while and they wave to one another and they say this phrase, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. It goes like this: Haribol. So since we're all in the cave, we can wave.
Haribo. Haribo.
Haribo.
Haribol.
Haribo.
Haribol. See you next time.